And we are live. So, welcome to episode 133 of An American Werewolf in New Jersey. I am the American Werewolf. Tonight, or today, I should say, because this is an international call that we're doing here, an international stream. I've got, returning to the show, Julia Morgan. And as you all know, Julia is a producer and audiobook narrator who, in a short period of time, introduced me to a lot of new ideas regarding horror. And I'm constantly referencing them. English is not my first language, clearly. And even used, some of those ideas in last night's show when we were talking about No Country for Old Men, and how, horror is happening in other parts of the world. It's just Hollywood that's kind of falling apart, and perhaps rightly so. And then I also have Katrine. Is that how you spell? I've been saying Kat. Katrine J. Pulver, a.k.a. Lady Lovecraft. And Katrine is the widow and partner of the famous and beloved author Joe Pulver. And Joe Pulver made his bones in horror fiction, dark fantasy, and the hard-boiled genres. And I happen to have a copy of one of his books here, The King in Yellow Tales, Volume 1, which is available on Amazon. You can pick these books up just about anywhere. There's a lot of them that are available on Kindle, more so that I found than in the the page turning format. But they are available and they're reasonably priced. And I'm going to put the links to those descriptions where you can access Joe's work in the description after the show is over. And I thought that I would best describe this. This comes off the Lovecraft E-Zine Press. So that's the publishing company that's, tending to Joe's work here, so to speak. And the description on the back says that Joseph S. Pulver Sr. is the author of The Orphan Palace and Nightmare's Disciple. His work has appeared in Ellen Datlow's Year's Best Fiction, The Children of Old Leech, the Year's Best Weird Fiction, Book of Cthulhu, the Lovecraft E-Zine, and anthologies edited by Robert M. Price and S.T. Joshi. Joe's highly acclaimed short story collection, Blood Will Have Its Season, Sin and Ashes, and Portraits of Ruin were published by Hippocampus Press. Joe has edited 2 anthologies for Miskatonic River Press, A Season in Carcosa and The Grim Scribe's Puppets, winner of the Shirley Jackson Award for Best Edited Anthology. His work has earned praise from Thomas Ligotti, Ellen Datlow, Laird Barron, S.T. Joshi, Michael Sisko, and Jeff Thomas, among many others. And also available by Joseph S. Pulver Sr., Blood Will Have Its Season, available on Amazon in Kindle edition from Lovecraft E-Zine Press. So these works...
Did you mention Nightmare's Disciple?
Yes, I did. It was one of the first ones that they brought up.
Oh, cool.
And this is, and The Orphan Palace.
Right.
So
no worries about that, Jules. What you just heard were Joe's words. He blurbed his own blurb.
Well, in that way, you're sure to get it right.
Right.
It's like that old saying: if you want something done, do it yourself.
Right.
And so I feel that that's definitely the right way to go about things. Kat, may I call you Kat? Is that okay?
Absolutely. I'll explain that in a second. Go ahead.
Okay. If you could, Julia, located here in London, but you as a first-time guest on the show, thank you to both, first of all, for coming on, Kat, especially Julia, after your last experience. Thank you for agreeing to come on again. I can't thank you enough. But Kat, could you give us a little bit of background yourself. I mean, where you are, so on and so forth, where you come from, these sorts of things.
The mini bio and why the hell I'm here, right? Um, as this apparently is the forum of non-native speakers, I am not a native speaker of English myself. I try to avoid the classical German TH traps, as in, this is the house we live in. My trouble is with the NW. So if I stutter or something sounds weird, bear with me. I'm trying.
Okay.
Um, I have been born and raised in Berlin, Germany. To the immense pleasure of my husband, I have been born in East Germany, which always gave him a kick. Um, yeah, the beast from the East, as he used to happily refer to himself. I live in the north of Berlin, still in the East, by the way, never really strayed far away from my home grounds. Um, I'm going to steal a page or five from Julia's book because I love the way she introduced herself a couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
I've been always a voracious reader. As soon as I could read fluently enough, my parents both decided I was done with bedtime stories and was instead handed books to read on my own in the hope that I would fall asleep, which of course never worked because we all know how that happens with the torches and the blankets and reading until 5 a.m. or something like that. No,
Sounds about right.
I sadly had a glass window in my bedroom, so my parents would be able to walk by before they went to bed, and more often than not would open the door. I can see you. All right. So that was that. My parents' library was small but really well sorted. So as soon as I was done with my own fairy tale books, I was pretty much given the chance of either reading Sherlock Holmes or Harriet Beecher Stowe.
Oh,
And
okay.
Jules is gonna love this. Of course, I stayed with Holmes because screw the rest.
Yeah.
So I moved straight on from Holmes to Nordic crime at the proud age of 10. I was reading the kinds of things that only now made it to the TV. Not exactly Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, but the general Nordic crime was my thing until I turned what? 13, 14? I have a vague memory that after the wall came down, one of the first books I bought and dragged with me was the German edition of Stephen King's It.
Oh, okay. So you got right to it. Yes.
Huge ass red book, really heavy. And I remember having that in the back of my bicycle in the basket because it fit perfectly. I don't know how it came across, but I just know it talked to me. I bought it. I read through it, and on the same line, or along the same lines, I'm also a huge Batman fan, and I was given a book that should have been PG-13, but never got a PG rating. So I ended up reading Joe Lansdale, amongst others, unknowingly having my first Lovecraft introduction in a Batman story of all things.
Okay.
Oh God, what was it? God of Knives? Knife God? Subway Jack.
Okay.
Subway Jack? Something along these lines. If Mike Davis ever sees this, he's going to kill me because it's one of his favorite stories as well.
Keep talking. I'll Google.
Was it God of Fear?
I don't think so. I think it was actually Subway Jack. Well, we'll find. You should be able to find it at least via Subway Jack. But it's Joe Lansdale throwing together a Jack the Ripper idea with Batman, and more than just a touch of Lovecraft, gods beyond the spheres and whatnot. And I was scared out of my skull. And it took me, 15 years or so to realize, oh shit, of course I was. It's a Lansdale going Lovecraft story. And then, very long story, very short. My father died shortly before my 15th birthday, and I started to really dig into big books.
Okay.
And a friend of my mom's, of all people, introduced me to a German writer by the name of Wolfgang Holbein, who is writing something that's called The Witcher of Salem, to throw an English title on that. And the main character is his own creation, but he has a sidekick / mentor that teaches him a lot of things and introduces him to the great old ones and time travel and all the chaos. And it's a foul-mouthed, cigar-smoking version of HPL.
Okay.
And that was my introduction to Lovecraft. And I knew that was not the correct portrayal, but I wanted to know who had inspired the character, and ended up making a couple of pen pals through a magazine back then when you still wrote letters.
I remember.
To real people.
Yes.
Back in the 1700s or so. And I was introduced to all kinds of people at this point. All of a sudden, Lovecraft, Poe, Machen, reintroduced to Holmes, of all things, and started spreading out, started reading. And then my own death trap happened at some point in the mid to late 2000s, the internet.
Okay.
And I found MySpace, and I found jewels, and the rest is history, as they say.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Gonna have coffee, gonna stop talking.
Well, I hope not, because I was just about to hit you with a follow-up there. So you're talking about coming from East Germany.
Yes.
And I don't want to get into politics or anything like that, but I would ask, in your experience or in your recollection before the wall came down, it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, you had access to more traditional books that you like to read. So, you had access to Conan Doyle and these sorts of things. But then after, the wall came down, then, it's like an influx of new material and authors and things like that. Can you talk a little bit about, were you aware that there were, maybe restrictions on the types of book? Were you aware of these other types and genres that were out there, but you just couldn't get your hands on them? Or was it just, okay, these are the books and I'm good?
I was 11 and a half when the wall came down. I've been brought up in a very regime-bound household. My here's the other point. I'm sorry, ignore that my telephone is talking. Where was it? Right. My father, another point which Joe loved to pieces, was a high-ranked officer in the Stasi.
Oh, okay.
And due to that, we
I asked the right question. Okay.
We, of course, had severe restrictions anyway, due to my father's work. And he believed in the system, so he put all these things through, which means I was made aware relatively fast that, yes, of course, there's other books out there, but maybe the message didn't gel with what the system was trying to tell us. Some were a bit too Western, if that makes sense.
Sure.
There wouldn't be any no current American writers, but things like Harriet Beecher Stowe were available. So the kind of limitations we had put upon us, just by means of being able to buy and import books, were much less severe than what's happening in the States at this point. I was able to read pretty much anything as long as it wasn't promoting Western values. I think that's the easiest way to say that.
Okay.
And I was made aware of these values and why they didn't work for me. Same with TV. We had, in theory, only TV antennas that allowed us to see the 2 channels we had. But what we saw, especially, let's say, during summer vacation, when the kids were off, there was, until 2 or 3 p.m., we had child and teenager-friendly TV shows going. Anything from fairy tales to Wild West shows.
Okay.
Like real Wild West shows. Not the Dukes of Hazzard, but,
the classics. Yeah, more classics.
Right.
Yeah,
so we weren't too limited. It was all about politics at this point.
Right.
And then the wall came down, and my parents, especially my father, having realized that there was no way the system was going to come back anyway, tried to adapt by means of not limiting me or my mom. So reading was go. I was brought up to always broaden my horizons. So my father grudgingly went along with, all right, let her read this then. And we would talk a lot, and we would communicate over dinner, over lunch. What are you reading? What's going on in school? And I was always, he always tried to involve me in discussions about things. So I wasn't just, gulping all this up, especially not for horror, which my parents didn't find out about for a long, long time. Funny thing, I'll get to that in a second. No, but all of a sudden there were bookstores, and my parents were both voracious readers, so they went into this with absolute delight. Same with music. TV was wild. Imagine stopping your life in the 60s. And I mean stopping it with 2, 3, 4 TV channels. And then switching to today. This is what happened to me. Overnight, we literally went from 2 channels that had news and decent TV, movies, to 10 channels, 12, with everything from Heart to the Dukes of Hazzard.
Oh God, I apologize. I can only apologize.
That's okay.
I can only apologize.
To telenovelas, holy. All of a sudden, there's things like, what is it? The Bold and the Beautiful? Is that it?
Oh God. You saw the worst.
General Hospital. And all these things. It's like, oh my God, is this what everyone wanted? Is this why we broke down the wall?
It's what we got. I don't know if it's what people wanted, but it's what we ended up with, and it's gotten more trashy as time has progressed.
But then again, I also managed there. I stayed with my roots. I would watch. I was a Star Trek fanatic in the 90s.
Yeah.
So I would watch Star Trek a lot, especially Deep Space Nine, because it's nice and gloomy and dark.
Yeah. That's the best series. Yeah, Commander Sisko.
Yeah, my death trap was Odo.
Okay, yeah.
An episode, and it's like, holy shit, they wrote a character just for me. How nice of them. No, and I stayed along these lines. I would be watching Murder, She Wrote, of course. Heart to Heart for the guest appearances. Desperately trying to avoid Matlock and things like that, because I was, as much as I love crime, I just can't stand these drawn out court show things. Oh God. No.
That's bad television.
Bad, it is indeed. And as for the part of my parents only found out about the horror, I was always able to buy books on my own and or buy them, get them from the library. And our librarians were brilliant. They didn't care for age restrictions. I was very soon able to go into the grown-up section and would get my King books from there, and my Poe and what little Lovecraft they had. And because I went to the library before my mom was done with work and would bring the books back at the same point, she never quite found out what I was reading. And then I oh God, she hasn't forgiven me to this day for this, I'm sure. We had a video rental a couple of minutes down the street.
Okay.
And I gave her a list of the videos I wanted, because I wouldn't be able to get in there because I was under 16.
Okay.
What I didn't know is that back in the 90s, most horror movies had these very explicit covers.
They had very explicit what?
The cover art for the video.
Oh, yeah. They were very sexually explicit. Yeah.
And there was my mom bringing home a copy of Reanimator and Necronomicon. And she wasn't talking to me for a day or two. What is this?
Deservedly so. For one, having to watch that, and second,
She didn't watch it. I never made my mom watch this. The good thing about this, and don't get me wrong, let me finish the sentence before people start torching me.
Of course.
When my father passed away, I'm an only child, so my mom was desperate to fulfill my every wish. And I tried to behave, and I never asked her for anything expensive or whatever. But my taste in books, music, and videos really, really quickly took care of me getting my own VCR. So she didn't have to watch that kind of stuff anymore.
Yeah. I have I have similar, tastes, obviously. Growing up here, we're thousands of miles away, but in terms of the genres of books, and reading those old classics, and then, somewhere.
1 second. You said growing up here. You also said English isn't your first language.
Yeah. I was
Where
making
did you
it.
grow up?
No. I grew up here. It's just, I mumble and ah.
This is just New Jersey, I'm hearing. I
suppose so. People say, I think as I'm in the southern part of the state, it's a very small state.
Yeah.
And as you get to the north, you get closer to the traditional New York accent. So there's definitely a divide that way. But down here in the South, I guess, I mean, I would, it's like I'm here every day, so you just don't pick up on it, but I suppose so.
Yeah, I just know. I'm used to German accents, and most of the German accents are barely colored by any other language. We have the most horrible dialects, horrible enough to make sure people literally don't understand each other. And we do speak the same language. It's really weird. And we have parts where French is sneaking in by means of vocalizations. And we have parts in Bavaria where the Alpine dialects from Switzerland and Austria sneak in. So the language gets a bit harsher, but we barely have this mixed in thing as it happens especially in the States, where certain parts of, I don't know, New York and Jersey sound like the mafia just took over.
Yeah, okay.
That's very fine. Irish, so that I was just like, all right, wait a second. Is he kidding? Is he not? Okay, no, never mind.
I'm not, I'm not smuggling cigarettes without tax stamps or anything like that on the side. This is just, yeah, I've passed through Germany. Like I've been to Berlin, just passing through in flights and things like that. I've been to France, so I've been like to the border there in Alsace. Where the wines are very nice and things like that. But I haven't had the opportunity, except for long layovers, to be through Germany. Hopefully, I'll get a chance to amend that, and get back over to the European side of things before too long. I got back here in 2020 during the lockdowns, and things have just been kind of funky, depending on where you planned on traveling in terms of restrictions and things like that. But they seem to have largely opened up now. And I'm hoping that continues to be the case. So, I could get back on the road. But
I wouldn't make reservations just yet.
Yeah, is it still?
I don't want to speak for Jewel. She can touch a well if she wants to. I'm under the impression things aren't too great in the UK at this point. And we have enough of, and I'll be political here for half a second, friends of Agent Orange who buy into the same agenda that he did. And they're COVID deniers. We're done with this. I've been vaccinated 3-4 times. I got sick twice. Nothing happens. They're going into conspiracy central at this point, and you can't even argue with them trying to tell them, well, if you hadn't been vaccinated, you would have been sick once and probably died, idiot. So the restrictions are low. The IQ of some people is lower. So I don't expect this to be over by autumn. Quite the opposite.
Okay.
Well, here we've got.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Here we've got no restrictions as such, but my cleaner's grandson is just 3 months old and has tested positive for COVID.
Oh, shit.
My dear
I'm
friend
sorry.
Kathy had a very nasty bout of it last week, and I was quite worried for her, though she's made a complete recovery. My ex had it just a couple of 6 weeks ago, and he was also quite ill. So it's still round and about. The NHS is still backed up to the hilt, so getting appointments, medical appointments, is very difficult. Anything that isn't really, if you need urgent treatment, you're laughing because they're great like that. But anything long term or what they call elective, you're screwed. Travel has been people's travel plans are being cancelled at the last minute because flights are being cancelled without warning. So there's people turning up at the airport to go on their sort of yearly holidays only to find that they can't go because the plane's being cancelled. So, I'm lucky really because I'm watching my friends getting badly affected by this, whereas I'm in this kind of protective bubble caused by the fact that I don't go out much. So I'm okay, but people around me are suffering.
It's just crazy. One last thing, because I don't want to go too political and too weird. My mom is in her mid-70s. If I tell her real age, she's going to kill me. And her friends are 5 to 10 years older. Everyone still desperately holds on to restrictions by means of they've met through the whole COVID lockdown thing because they're all dog owners. So they went for walks and they met for coffee, social distancing, blah, blah, blah. Nobody got sick. In the last 2 months, a couple she's friends with both got sick. It's not quite clear whether they even caught it, other than having passed it on to each other. The husband of one of her friends, who literally never leaves the flat unless he has a doctor's appointment, caught COVID, and nobody even knows how. Because in the infective time, he would have been home. This thing is still out there, and people just don't understand that it, as harmless as it presents, and especially now in the summer, it's like, oh, it's just a summer cold and whatnot. Yeah, a friend of mine, his mom has a summer cold at 85, and guess who just tested positive? So yeah, don't make any travel plans. Let's go to happier places, mutilated peoples, zombies, whatever. Let's not talk politics.
Okay. Well, I mean, hopefully, this will all go away and, we can all just get back to living, stress-free about, health. Just comparison over here, most things have opened up. So things are pretty open here.
Oh, it's the same here. I only have to wear a mask in public transportation. So, and I'm living next to a tram station. Yay. So we'll see what good. The next contagion is gonna come.
Yeah, it seems like we're in that stage now where it's just going to be the next thing, and that's just going to be the thing for.
I just demand this time we don't call it COVID or anything. We just call it what it is. If the bats are reliable again, responsible again, just call it the fucking vampire pestilence or something like that.
Well, we've got monkeypox now, so we've got monkeypox.
I don't care for
that's
monkeys.
It's a little more lighthearted.
Really?
Yeah, you know something? I lived for a time in Asia, and monkeys are not a joke. Monkeys are horrible, nasty creatures. And we used to have these. I remember once traveling to Vietnam. I went on a class trip, and I took like 44 ninth graders to Vietnam for a week, which was its own particular kind of hell. But we had this. We had these monkeys out there. And I literally, these monkeys had this one front tooth in the center of their mouth from the top, and it was about the size of a shot glass. And you looked at this thing, and you're like, yeah, this isn't Kipling. This isn't the Jungle Book. This is a nasty, nasty creature who's become adapted to having people feed it. And so it's become demanding. And I saw a monkey, one of our kids, and he wasn't my favorite kid. It's been a long time. I can say that now. The monkey came up behind him without him realizing it because they're not big, but they're not small either. They're big enough. came up behind and just grabbed the top of his head and slapped him right in the face from behind, broke his glasses, stole his hat, and ran away all in the course of like 3 seconds. And I was like, good fucking monkey, good for you. Wanted to do that
I'm
for
sorry.
years. No,
Yeah.
it's all. But
No, I remember that Joe, when he was in his late teens, used to do groceries for a lady, and he would never get over this. The woman had a spider monkey.
oh no,
Don't ask me
no.
how, don't ask me why. And this little guy was very cool with females because he was living with them. But heaven help you if you were a male.
Yeah, it's a challenge.
She always locked him up in this cage, and he would literally trying to take the cage down to get out and do heaven knows what to the males.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're nasty creatures, man.
Well, my grandfather, this is going back, this is going back almost 100 years. My grandfather was raised in India, and he was bitten on the knee by a monkey. And this was they were in a hill station miles from anywhere. So somebody caught the monkey, killed the monkey, sent its head off to some station to get tested. In the meantime, they had to give him rabies injections into his stomach because that's the only part of the anatomy that can take it without swelling up, because rabies was a real risk out there. And so he had these injections. They were hideously painful. They did not created against rabies. But eventually, about sort of 6 weeks later, the results came back from the lab that the monkey didn't have rabies after all. So I never think of monkeys as safe creatures. I always think that they bite.
I lived in India for a while, and once I was at a hill station for a weekend getaway, and I can't remember the name of the hill station now. For some reason, it just eludes me. Mataran. I was in Mataran. And I was at this hotel, and they told you to not leave your doors unlocked during the day because the monkeys would literally open the doors, come in and grab your things, and then run off into the woods with them. And I'll never forget, I was going to the pool, and I had brought a book, and I had like my iPod, we remember iPods. I had an iPod, and I was just going to lay at the pool, maybe go for a swim. It was a beautiful day, and read my book. And at the pool was this monkey, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm not turning my back on. And they showed me its mouth, and that tooth opened up again, and I'm like, yeah, forget it. I'm going back inside. Forget it. And they keep them away with slingshots. Yeah, because they're too brazen. I mean, I don't want to hurt any animal either, but otherwise you can't say go away. It won't. It'll just look at you like, I don't know who you think you're talking to, but all right, so that was a weird veer.
So here's the finishing up heart warmer. I don't know how old I was, 2nd, 3rd grade. And we had one of these typical, we amuse the kids for Christmas show. And there was a dare, and I was volunteered. And I say volunteered to participate in the dare. And there were 3 boxes, crates. They were safe enough. And all we knew is something alive was in each of the boxes. And we were supposed to reach in. That was the dare. If we dared reaching in and finding out what it was, nothing was dangerous, nothing was bitten. And I ended up pulling up a baby cheetah. Cheetah. Oh, shoot me. Yeah, wouldn't I have loved that? Chimpanzee. How the fuck did I come up with cheetah? Because my mom loves one. Baby chimpanzee. And totally
right back
cuddly.
In the box.
Right, and crawled up into my arms and nestled up there and didn't want to let go. Totally cute. Smelled like hell, but cute. Years later, we had a traveling circus in town. And my best friend pulls me over. She said, oh, you gotta see this chimpanzee. It's totally nuts. It's sitting back there in its cage, and it's throwing things at people. And of course, there were a lot of teenagers around hoping it was going to throw what everyone expected it to throw. It didn't. And everyone had walked off, and I just walked by, and all of a sudden I could literally feel the hands coming through the cage, and it reaches for me, and I'm like, oh, it's going to kill me. It's going to rip my shirt off or something, because now it's pissed off, and now I'm going to end up with scratches. And the damn thing hugged me.
Oh.
arms. I was like, I know you. And the one of the people responsible came over and said, what's going on? I said, did you guys years back and I'll be part of a Christmas thing for kids? And he's like, yeah. I said, I think I know that chimpanzee. And turned out that was actually the one they had hidden away. And damn them, he had a memory.
Oh,
I don't
that
know
is
how
cute.
the hell he recognized me, if it was smell or something, but it wasn't like it was, desperate to come home with me or anything. No heartbreak included. It was just a really
Yeah.
weird, like, I know you.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm sure it wanted out of that. Yeah, yeah.
All right. No, it
Okay,
wasn't like it was desperate or anything. It's just like very cute, the moment of
okay,
recognition. Then, screw them. I don't know if she's going to feed me. I'm going to stay here. All right.
okay. So, let's see. I, I recall, also getting into horror and, probably around 12, 13 years old. And, my first exposure, I think I told Julia, was an anthology called Dark Forces. And then,
Ooh.
moving on, and then I had Stephen King's The Mist, which was very, much of the Lovecraft style, and early King. And then, sort of moving on to Christine, which is not the best of his books because it's kind of hard to write or see a film about a car that's alive. It's kind of a ridiculous premise. But I distinctly recall, the transformation, the shift in my mind, from saying I didn't know these sorts of things were possible, because I had also grown up at the same time, on the old Universal classics with Lugosi and, Karloff and Lon Chaney Jr., and then graduating through my own family to Hammer, and Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee and these sorts of things. But I didn't know that that was possible in a book. And I was an avid reader. And
Okay.
so once I realized that I could have this in both formats, that just sort of narrowed everything down like such a great deal. That I've kind of never looked back, and here I am, decades later, running a podcast, largely on the same topics. So maybe you could talk a little bit about, well, tell us how you met your husband and how that took
Funny
off.
thing. I was just about to use that as a segue into write that. You never know what happens. So I mentioned that in the mid to late 2000s, I finally managed to get access to the internet. My first flat was not on the map. My second and third flat had to be used with an USB stick and a SIM card
Ooh, ooh,
in
ooh.
Berlin, of all places. And of course, the coverage was not amazing. And I worked for the provider and I had a high level contract still. Um, so I always avoided chat rooms due to being a non native speaker. And the one thing I hate is sitting there thinking about, how am I going to phrase this? Am I using the right words? Are people going to start laughing about this? Is this even worth something? And then I found MySpace.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Amazing place back then. Uh, the best of everything. You could have little videos, you have music, um, and I had always had a slightly different take on Lovecraft
Okay.
and on music. So I decided to just create a kind of information point for people. Back then, this is where the moniker of Lady Lovecraft started. So for every, out of every 10 people, 9 were Lovecraft fans, and one was like, "Who are you modeling? Can I get pictures?"
Sounds
Um,
like MySpace to me.
yeah. So I had started with indie movies because I never wanted to promote the big movies, because if you know them, yay for you. If you don't know them, why the hell are you on my page anyway? So I had indie movies up there. I had bands promoted that were based in my own favorite music, that is electro industrial.
Okay.
By the way, if you ever see this, hi Jason. Jason Wallach of The Unquiet Void was one of the first people I came across.
Okay.
And so was Julia, who introduced herself as a fellow Lovecraftian and a fellow female, which back then was rarer than it is these days. So we started talking relatively fast about anything under the sun. And she introduced me to a hell of a lot of people, including our dear Willem. And at some point through Willem, I came across Joe, who had just published or was about to publish his first collection, Blood Will Have Its Season. And he was extremely shy. He never had an ego when it came to writing. He knew his music, he knew his reading, but his own work, as so often happens with so many brilliant writers, his own ego was non-existent. So we talked about literature, about this and that, and at some point he kind of dropped that he had a book about to be published and said, okay, so where's your MySpace page for that? And was like, well, MySpace page? Another one? He hated tech. Oh God. So I forgot. One of us was off sick and one of us was on vacation. So we had 2 weeks to literally spend 10, 12 hours together, chatting on the side via, if anyone remembers that, ICQ.
Sure.
I aged you, I'm sorry.
That's quite all right.
So we chatted via ICQ. I built the MySpace page for Blood Will Have Its Season as a promo page he could hand around. And we talked and we talked and we talked. And at some point, we both realized that we maybe should take another look at just the relationship level we were slip sliding into. Because all of a sudden this guy became flirty and I flirted back and it's like, wait, what? What's going on? Oh, speaking of what's going on, I'm sorry. Go away. I'm sorry, that was my alarm. Not to finish the show, I have an alarm going for 5:45. The recipient of the alarm knows that I'm not calling at this point, so we're good. No, and we had slipped into just talking very personal and very amicable, and it's like, all right, you're married. I'm in a long-term relationship. Can we just take a look at this again? And I was about to travel to Dublin in 2009, and I said, we'll take a week off. We're not going to talk to anyone, or we'll talk to others, but not each other, and just see what the hell this is. Didn't quite work out. I sent the last email before I boarded the plane in Berlin. I sent out another email that I had landed safely, which he had requested. And pretty much every picture of me taking in Dublin when I'm not standing there admiring something from the Easter Rising or library is me being on the phone. So that was bad.
Okay.
This is how people meet in the weirdest places. I was doing the online dating game before there was something like the online dating game.
Yeah, I think a lot of things, I think a lot of people ended up connecting in one respect or another, probably not always to the extent that, it led to marriage. But
yeah, no, especially not to someone from overseas, for crying out loud. Yeah.
Yeah. But I say sometimes when I hear things or I see a good podcast or a great discussion, that this is what the internet is supposed to be.
Yeah.
And that it was designed to bring people together, not kind of what it is often used for, but for its highest purposes. Right. It really is a miracle.
Look at the Scorpion. If not for her, I wouldn't have met Willem. I wouldn't have met Joe. I wouldn't have met her, for crying out loud. And Julia has opened.
The funny thing, I've got
Huh?
My recollection is that Joe introduced you to me. That is
That
really
might
odd.
be that no. This all of this happened extremely fast. I know I met Joe on MySpace. That I
Mm.
definitively know. Way before we met on because I hunted him down on Facebook later on.
Stalker. A stalker. Okay.
Well,
Absolutely.
I
Oh God, I was
met
terrified.
John. Sorry,
Yeah.
I met Joe. I'm sort of half asleep here. I met Joe because I sent him a fan letter through email. I think I got it through one of the Yahoo groups, which was
I remember
before
those. I remember
before
those.
MySpace
Yeah.
took off.
Oh
Yeah.
God.
And I
And
wrote him a phone letter, and he wrote back, and we sort of corresponded from there on. I met Willem through Thomas Ligotti online. A guy went with
same
the
here.
nickname of Dr. Bantry, and he introduced me to Willem.
Yeah.
And can't remember where I first met Jeff and Scott Thomas. So I can't remember where
That
I
would
first
have
met
been
them.
Ligotti Online, if anything, because I know Jeff doesn't really do
Probably.
much social media. He's got the Facebook presence, but that's
Mhm.
about it. And I remember, I know I knew your name.
Mm.
It's quite possible that I know we talked before. It's quite possible that Joe reconnected us in a way.
Could be.
But I know I've seen your name before, and I know we talked on MySpace, even if briefly, maybe exchanging comments. But I knew the name was familiar. Same with Willem. When I saw he had his vlog on MySpace, and it's like, damn it, I know that guy. Where do I know that guy from? And Willem was you were always someone, and still are, who's easily approachable, who's a name that's known due to the readings, due to you just being part of the Lovecraft fan base and deeper in the background, with the readings, with the producing, with everything else. And Willem was if I had to paint a memory of Willem, to me, he was always the guy at the door to some underground club. You know, the guy was like, hey, psst, want to come in here?
Ladies, give me 10 seconds. I'll be right back. Okay, keep talking about what you're talking about. I'll be back in 10 seconds.
Of course.
So that was always Willem to me. You know, pretty much the first guy that you came across was like, how are you? Where you come from? I remember him going,
Willem opened doors for people. It's just,
yeah,
you know.
that was
wonderful.
him. You know, half of talking about Lovecraft, half freaking out. Oh my God, it's a female fan. Come here. Let me show you to the guys. Wait, what?
I'm talking a lot about Barbara Streisand. Barbara
Oh,
Streisand
God.
is and Barbara Streisand. I can't quite see it myself, but he loved her, you know.
Oh, I remember him going, oh, I had to buy this again. I had to buy the CD, and he holds it up. Barbara Streisand, of course. And Joe and I watched this. Was he live somewhere? I think so. I think it was on the e-zine. And he holds it up, and Joe and I looked at each other. It's like, another one? Because I know he had a week or two ago talked about having bought this. And he was such a fanatic, he couldn't pass it by, even though it was more or less the same copy. I know the feeling. Back in the day, I used to buy single imports from Japan for one song just because I needed to have it. I get it.
What was the
song? That was something by Enya, actually. I think it was one of the Christmas songs she had done. No. A Gaelic version of one of her songs is, I have to have this 15 fucking bucks for one song, but that's fanatism for you.
Let me. You guys seem to have connected, both of you, around being fans of Lovecraft.
No,
you know, these sorts of things, and M.R. James and these sorts of things. I also, being a fan of Lovecraft, you know, I managed to pick up, you know, the Library of America version, which has, you know, I find it to be one of the better
editions. You have to get them in different covers. That's interesting. Yeah, I like that. I've reined myself in a little bit because I need the money for other things. But to have different covers and different editions of the same stuff. Oh, yes.
Let me ask you, what is his? And I want to go to each of you, and maybe I'll get Julia in here first. What is his and authors like, because we've also Julia and I also talked about this with M.R. James.
Mm.
What is the impact of these writers, not just in fiction, but in horror? I mean, at least to you, because it's a subjective thing.
I don't quite understand that question.
What is it? What is the influence? How have these works, these authors, or pick one? We can talk about Lovecraft. What is the influence that this author has had on you necessarily, and what you feel the broader genre of horror is, be it film or other authors like Joe, who clearly worked in the in the Lovecraft model, that cosmic sort of thing.
Easy.
Apologies.
Lovecraft is the main man for me. Lovecraft is the main man, and as a youngster, my love for Lovecraft marked me out as a fucking weirdo at school, but I was already a weirdo at school, so whatever. So initially, it didn't seem to have any, but then, we used to hang around the Fantasy Centre bookshop in Holloway Road. So as Lovecraft brought me in contact with that, then later on, it was Lovecraft that I was already recording for LibriVox, but Lovecraft made me into a YouTuber and a person who uses the Internet Archive. Through my love of Lovecraft, I met Kat, I met Joe, I met Willem, I met so many people that I love and respect, and so a lot of my social life comes from Lovecraft. Lovecraft was my springboard into other authors. His supernatural horror in literature became my reading list for a while. And I've not read everything that he's recommended, but an awful lot of them I read because he recommended them. He expanded my vocabulary.
Oh God, yeah.
Everybody's vocabulary, and just I certainly am a fan of other authors on my shelf, but Lovecraft is the main man for me.
Yeah.
And yes, what can I say?
What about you, Kat?
It's been very similar. I was in the horror genre before I knowingly came across Lovecraft. Like I said, the Joe Lansdale story was the first thing that really scared me, and I mean really scared me. But that was Lovecraftian influence. So when I ultimately stumbled across him, I was already very deep into pulp literature, which is a phrase I use with all the love I can. Joe usually said, sometimes you want pizza, sometimes you want a steak. I was always the one for the drive-through. Give it to me, as bad as it gets. Z-level horror movies, count me in. Pulp fiction of the worst way, absolutely. Quick, short reading, lots of fun. And I was reading a weekly pulp magazine where short stories had been translated. Sometimes there were German stories in, but most often they went all across the horror genre, which was published by one of the major publishers in Germany. So they pretty much threw in things they could use. And I was introduced to all kinds of the weirdest stuff. And they had an issue featuring one of the Witcher of Salem short stories. So I finally managed to be daring enough to write a letter to the editor, which was a 4 or 5 page thingy in each issue. And they just print the letters. You could ask questions, you could ask for pen pals, and I pretty much did both. And that's how Lovecraft had always been in my life. He was an anchor point, a way to meet people of various persuasions, sometimes pretty much always horror people. 1 out of 100 picked out the lady part, and it's like, all right, what is this about? Oh, this is my other love in life, Lord Byron. God, I love his poetry. So he was always a means of getting into contact with people, sometimes in the good way, lately in the bad way due to politics and everything. And I'm not even going to touch this because it's a whole different level. There's criticism that needs to be there. That's fine.
Okay.
No, this is going to be a 2-hour discussion just to get the groundwork started.
Yeah.
And I'm not going there. So yeah, it brought me into contact with musicians, like I said, Jason Wallach, with readers like Jules, with writers. I mean, and when you meet these people in person, it's like, oh my God, they're just people.
Yeah.
What's going on here? I remember. Okay, Jules, you're familiar with Mike Griffin. Mike, are you familiar with Michael Griffin, the writer?
I've heard of him, but I don't think I've ever read anything by him.
Okay, you might want to change that. He's a great, not just because he's a personal friend and Joe championed him, but he's got an interesting style. Absolutely. So Mike Griffin has real life and started writing at some point, and he's brilliant. And he's a big guy. He's a daring guy. He knows how to talk, and he will talk your ear off given the chance, except when he needs to talk to his contemporaries, because he's a fanboy. So here we are at the Necronomicon, and I just walked out to Joe at the Smoker's Corner and said, holy shit, Laird Barron is in there. And so was a couple of others, and oh my God, and he's wearing a comic t-shirt, and I'm such a fangirl, and oh wow. And Joe turns to me and gives me a book of Laird Barron's to have it signed. But he will not approach Laird because he's a fanboy. And all of a sudden, Mike Griffin gives me a copy of the same book with the request to have it signed by Laird Barron, but he won't go in there because he's a fanboy. Ultimately, Mike's wonderful wife, Lena, and I walk in there having the books signed for our husbands. And in return, Laird Barron pulls out a book by Mike and a book by Joe, handing it back to us, asking us to have it signed for him because he won't go out there because he's a fanboy.
Let me just say, I've been to one or two cons in my time. One kind of recently last year, I went to one of the cons, and even with some of I was surprised at myself about how starstruck I got meeting some of the, you're not even, I won't mention names because I don't want to, make it sound like I'm, but I mean, I got there and I was, and these people are just talking to me, and I met this. I remember meeting Rich Brake. I don't know if you know who Rich Brake is, the American actor. He does a lot of work for Rob Zombie, and he's like the most. He always
Richard
plays.
Brake is English. Richard Brake is English.
Okay. Well,
go for the juggler. Get it.
I met him.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks for that. Okay. But I meet him, and he's just the nicest. Like, he always plays a homicidal maniac, and
He's lovely.
just like he's the
lovely.
nicest person. And he's like, yeah, I do 90 minutes of yoga he's like, my kids think I'm really messed up because I asked him, how do you keep playing all these dark people? Is that difficult? After I stammered and stumbled for 3 minutes, and he's like, I just, I do 40 minutes of meditation every day, and I do 90 minutes of yoga every day. And he comes out, and he's talking, and he's putting his arm around me, and I'm thinking, this is the guy who's in, like this and that and this and that. But they're just, yeah, you're right. At the end of the day, they're just people, and most of them are so nice.
Yeah. And it's so easy to get starstruck. Yeah, I remember my first room party, the famous room parties where only the cool people get invited to, that is the writers gather to drink, period. And Joe and I had just gotten married, literally just gotten married the day before in Providence. Yay! So much for the influence of Lovecraft on my life. And I was invited there too, mostly to be one of the chaperones to make sure we don't take the room apart, along with a couple of other writers' wives.
Okay.
And most of the partners of the writers were just standing there occasionally looking at each other, and then looking back at the crowd, it's like, holy shit, do you see who's here?
Mm.
Who's talking to each other? The amount of talent in one room is staggering. And I was so impressed. At some point, Joe turns to me and says, "Hun, can you get me another drink?" And I was about to say, "Of course, sir." Wait, what? But never mind. So yeah, Star Trek.
Oh, it's you.
Star Trek
You.
is totally
Okay,
a
yeah.
thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
no,
I
I was
just
just so into this whole admiration thing. I mean, I love his work. I'm literally the lucky fangirl that got to marry the guy she admires. Absolutely. But it's like, fuck.
Yeah, I remember going to the con, and one of the big appearances there was Brad Dourif. You know,
oh, he's lovely. I got
Mm.
my photo taken with him.
well, the
I'm
line
not
to
talking
see
to you, Julia, anymore. Forget it. Not happening.
the
He put
line.
his arm around me. He put his arm around
Somebody's
me.
turning green. That green monster. That green monster. We've conjured a green monster here in the conversation.
I've got to interject a little correction. Richard Brake was actually born in Wales,
Okay.
so he's not English at all. I'm very sorry if you're watching, Mr. Brake. I am so sorry I called you English. You are
I'm going to
welcome.
let him know as soon
Okay,
as I
for
get off the
that,
chat that Julia Morgan said that you were from. Yeah, all right.
no, for
No,
that alone,
he,
I forgive you for the Brad Dourif picture. Thank you.
he is. But I mean, the line for Dourif, and I'm I've been a lifelong Dourif fan. But the line for him was 5 hours.
I bet.
5 hours, and I couldn't do it, and because I realized that if I did that, that would be the entirety of my day at the con. Would just be waiting in line for Dourif, and then he had another appearance like in 4.5 hours. I realized, and so the timing was just wrong. So I went downstairs and I started to meet other people, and by the time I got to the third or fourth celebrity, I had sort of eased my way into sort of somewhat comfortably. Talking to these people who are just the nicest people you'd ever want to meet. They probably wouldn't be at the con, if they didn't want to meet anybody or anything like that. Let me ask this. So, I mean, you're married now. You're starting to meet these people. What's it like in terms of? Because I think you and I, a bit of the conversation that we've had was about what it was like professionally. In terms of the writing, to be married to Joe Pulver, and that you contributed.
Stop you from rambling, right?
No, because I want to hear these things too, and I'm equally starstruck by like anybody. I'm just like, So yeah, that's relatable.
Okay,
but talk about if you could.
Joe had been active as a writer in small magazines and the occasional anthology since late 80s, 88, 89, I want to say, or maybe the early 90s. I'm still working on getting the homepage back together, and there will be a timeline, but that was roughly it. And he had been destroyed in a review by none other than St. Joshi. And like so many careers that St. ruined, Joe was one of the victims. Jeff Thomas is another, because his reviews were nasty. That wasn't a review, that wasn't criticism, or at least constructive criticism. St. back in the day was hell-bent on taking people down. If he didn't like what he was reading, he would come after you with pitchforks and whatever he could find. So
can I interject real quick? Why do you think that was? Was he trying to like protect his own like position and things? So he would just take down something that he thought was good, and you're like, hey, no, this guy can't, or this lady can't,
For one thing, he's, I think, a Lovecraft purist.
Okay.
And the other thing is that he believes his view is the only one that counts.
Okay.
This is what I think. Jules, I could hear you breathe and try and interject.
Oh, this is such a fraught one. I'm just remembering he also said some really nasty things about William Meikle, which is like, There's no need for that. There's no need for that. You know,
He at one point,
it's kind of, it is so fraught, really, because I hate it when people I care about fight with each other.
yeah,
And, you know, ST was so wonderful to Willem,
yeah.
you know, and he has personally also been good to me.
He's when you
That's
meet him,
to
he's a
say that,
nice
you
guy.
know.
He
So,
personality or whatever, he
mm,
generally tries to be nice and pleasant, because he knows his position and he
yeah,
knows he has an influence and whatnot, and that's all good. Um,
mm,
but he believes that criticism needs to be to take something down, which I don't get. I get the people who say this is bull. I get the people that say they love it. I happen to be a huge fan of the Alien franchise, and I
mm-hmm,
get enough shit for that. That's fine. You know, we don't have to share the same taste.
mm,
Quite the opposite. That's what makes life fun. But ST also comes up with things. The introduction from Blood Will Have Its Season, which is my go-to thing, talks
mm,
about Willem and ST, Joe and ST shooting the breeze over a couple of beers.
mm.
Joe hasn't been drinking for 10 years at this point. There was no shooting the breeze over a couple of cold ones, unless the cold ones were iced tea.
Mm.
That's ST for you in a nutshell. No, but staying away from that. Um, where was I? Right. So Joe had the non-existent ego of many writers, and I had later on bought Blood Will Have Its Season, and he had also sent me a couple of his stories beforehand. And I have my timeline wrong because I have right. The book was almost out or was out at this point. It was very close. Either way, I just remembered having images from pictures from Dublin where I'm actually sitting there reading the book, which I had sent to him specifically just to nag him. Said, look at me. This is me with the book. Look at the book. The book. um, no, but he had sent me a couple of things, and I had just started giving him feedback, just as a reader, what I
Mm.
like, what I didn't quite understand, and he started explaining the King in Yellow mythology to me. He started explaining his word creations to me, which I found utterly fascinating to this day.
Mm.
Ritchie's City of Night, which he constantly quotes as his word creation Bible or idea. And so we started talking, and the progression into before we moved in together almost a year later was that even when it wasn't quite clear what our personal relationship was, I would get stories to read. I did the beta reading before I even knew there was such a thing. I just gave feedback, and Joe was dyslexic. So when I saw something, I corrected it.
Hmm.
So I slowly snuck into the proofreader thing as well, because not everything is being caught by the machine.
Right.
Same with the editing, because his use of punctuation was different. I'll leave it at that. And we're not just talking the exclamation points. So on occasion, back then in electronic version and later on in real life, I would get his stories. I would hand them back to him with the classical red ink. It's like, is this what you meant? Am I getting this wrong? And he always complained that I loved all his stories. I'm sorry, but I was also vicious about, spelling and writing and all the things that, because I just wanted it to be good. I wanted
Yeah.
it to look good on the page and be presented as error-free as possible.
Hmm.
Um, and that's pretty much how I fell into this whole editing / proofreading thing, which really is what most people who are in some kind of a friendship relationship, whatever, with a writer do automatically. You get sent something that is brand new and unpublished, and you read it, and then you read it again, and you start seeing things, and you talk to people. And as someone who's in a relationship with a writer, this of course extends into, can you print me this contract? So by and by, you get used to contract language, you get used to writing back to publishers on the fly, because I was, of course, the one scanning it back in and sending it via email. So, and it's just something that
That's a lot of
evolves.
support. That's a lot of support. I mean, that's you know, that
Yeah.
you know, moves across many facets. You know, from the earliest stages where, you know, you're just reading it, to, you know, to the paperwork and the administration of business, you know, and these sorts of things. So
Yeah, well, don't get me wrong, I'm absolutely not trying to toot my own horn here. It's just how things worked out. But
right.
I was the one, we had agreed that if we moved in together in a foreign country for him, I wanted him to be able to focus on his writing. I didn't want him to work in a daytime job unless foreign authorities here were forcing him to, which luckily never happened. And I was hell-bent on him being able to work and have health insurance. These were my two main points. And if you are in a relationship with any kind of artist, musician, writer, painter, some of them have strict work hours, some of them don't. Joe didn't. There were more often than not, I would get up in the middle of the night and find him working. More often than not, I would leave for work for a late or night shift and he'd be sleeping, and I would be tempted to strangle him because I wanted to go back to bed. But that didn't happen. And he would often email me. It's like, okay, here's the contract. He would just pass these things on to me because I had the printer in my office. The printer was able to scan. So that was...
I know somebody who's got one of those. Hold on.
Yeah. That was just...
Especially if it was laser jet. Oh, God.
Yeah. So that was just a natural evolution. You know, I had the office set up for all these things. He had bought me a unbelievable expensive laptop saying, you're going to do the office work for me. And I'm, oh, I will? Are you paying me for this? It's like, I love you. Always the same.
More and more
the
every day.
raises
Yeah.
I should have worked for, but never got. No, it's normal. If one of the people in a relationship is an artist who lives out of time and the other one is somewhat organized, guess who's doing the paperwork? You know, it ended up in a part where people like Derek from Hippocampus Press were like, Cat, I sent him a contract a week ago. I was like, okay. And I would just lean over because our offices were across the hallway. It's like, babe, did Derek send you a contract? Yeah. You want to send it to me? Oh, yeah. Give me a minute. He was so into the writing thing that it became natural just to take care of everything else. And oh God, there were so many people during the first Necronomicon, and we had been living together for more than 3 years at this point. It's like, oh, you are Cat. It's like, who the fuck are you? And why do you know me?
You've been talking
I
to
didn't
this
even have a
person for
name
years.
tag because they never worked out. So it turns out that writers amongst each other, they will talk about their significant others. And I knew of Lena Griffin before I knew Lena Griffin, because Mike talks about her. I know more about Mike Davis's wife than I should, because he talks about her a lot of time. She has a full-time job. She does the same. It's the same reason why Julia's name was so familiar, because people talk about the woman who promotes them. It is a grassroots operation that we do. And that's how we know each other. And that's why it's so much fun. And you remain a fangirl no matter what you do. You produce, you remain a fangirl. You translate, and it's like, holy shit, can I do this? Is this real? Are you paying me for this? Really? A German publisher by the name of Yellow King Productions had approached Joe for a mixed anthology for US writers, for German writers. And I had been in contact with the publisher previously, And Joe was always very tentative because German contracts usually are, oh God, complicated as hell. So I did a bit of the interconnecting work. It's like, he's really nice and he sounds good and I think he's okay. And she was like, nah. Ultimately, he convinced Jeff Thomas, Michael Sisko, and I'm sorry, JP, I can't say the name. Jaja Prakash. Jules, you know who I mean? The Indian writer, Jaja Prakash. I can never.
I keep pronouncing his name wrong. Jayaprakash Satyamurthy.
Sounds a lot better than mine and a lot closer.
Please don't be angry with me.
No, I think
JP
is going to be fine.
But he did allow me to record one of his stories, which I'm quite grateful. So I enjoyed it. I recorded 2 of his stories. I recorded Apocalypse Rhythm, and I can't remember the name of the other one, but either way, he's one
Your
to watch.
YouTube channel is my go-to place in a few minutes. So he had gotten all these people and himself together, and Yellow King Productions has an excellent way of translating things. We were a team of 2 people, and we both picked 2 stories where we did the skeleton translation, exchange for translation efforts. And then I looked at what I'd been given so far, going for, okay, is this correct? Yeah. Do we have the general idea correct? Yeah. Is there something missing? Nope. And then we started putting, muscles on the skeleton, a couple of veins, and finally the skin. And when our creation was complete, we would hand it to the publisher, and all 3 of us are bilingual. So the publisher would look at this and just go straight through it again, not knowing who had done which part of the translation, saying, okay, this works for me, this doesn't. Look at this again. Look at this again. Okay, the previous version worked better. But, and it's a lot of fun doing it as a team because there's no showing off what you did and how you do it. And my biggest thrill to this day is being able to say that my co-translator missed a paragraph in a Michael Sisko story. And I was allowed to translate a whole paragraph of Michael Sisko. And I'm very proud of that because I'm a damn fangirl.
Good for you. Let me ask, what was more difficult? Was it more difficult in terms of the completion of the story, or was it more difficult with the sort of peripheral things that were going on? I mean, and strictly in terms of your husband sitting down in front of the keyboard and, creating this story. Did you find that more difficult, or was it, the contracts, the translations, meeting with publishing houses, and, and things like that. Or what did you find it? I found the whole thing to be kind of even and the same. Because I imagine the creation of the story probably brought its own frustrations.
No.
Unless
not for him, for me on occasion. Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, I want to hear from you.
Everyone writes differently. Everyone works differently. The only thing everyone agrees on is the most hated question ever. Where do you get your ideas? And Joe would be often inspired by things he read, things he heard music-wise. That was always an amalgamation of all kinds of things. And he was very famous for having a little playlist at the end of several stories. Just the music he would have heard, 4 or 5 songs interlooped for weeks.
Oh,
so I would come home to the same soundtrack for weeks.
Example.
I loved it. It was a lot of fun because while we didn't share the same taste in music specifically, he wasn't listening to music I couldn't stand. So that was a fun part.
What was he listening to?
Joe was born in 1955 and he was a deadhead. That's all I'm going to say.
Oh, God.
He was all over the place. Yes, there's a huge ass Grateful Dead collection, but you literally have anything from blues
Okay.
to jazz to a little bit of electronic music. He was a huge fan of Brian Eno's. He adored Jim Morrison's
Okay.
poetry. He was a huge Dylan fan. He was all over the place, from Little Feat as a band to
Bit of a hippie.
absolutely to the MC5. I'm trying to come up with names
Oh
here.
God, get out the
Out of the
jams.
blue.
Okay.
Yeah, Great Funk Railroad, everything.
Okay.
And so that was very cool, just getting to know new music. Sometimes it would be annoying as hell, but just because you've heard it over and over again. But he had literally warned me. One of the first things was, I work with soundtrack lists and you will end up hating these songs. I never did. It was just weird. So I knew he was working on something new and the soundtrack had changed. But what he would probably describe as the most difficult part for himself was arranging the words. He was very explicit about wordplay and what had to go where. So for me, the most difficult thing was him saying, okay, I'm done. I'm so done. I've arranged the words. This is it. Okay, send me the story. Let me look at it. So it goes back, it's corrected, it's slightly edited, and it's saved under this particular name, and that's it. I would contact the publisher saying, Derek, we're done, or whoever. I've got the story. You can send me the contract. It's finalized. Joe will send you the thing. Send me the contract. And half of the times, I'm not lying, half of the times, the publisher would get back to me or the editor say, what the hell? Why? This is not the story you told me about. Joe would go back to the story and change the title
Yeah.
without telling me. Joe would add to the story, and all of a sudden it would be obvious that the last part hadn't been edited. And he would overshoot the length. At some point, some anthologies or anthologists will tell you, okay, I have X amount of space, X amount of words, X amount of authors. This is your cap. Do not go over this. And this is when you have to get back to me. And Joe was pretty good with the don't get over this if I kept an eye on it, and perfect with the timeline. He never had a problem with that. But he would change the titles. And now that I'm going through his estate, it's like, I know this story. I've read this. Where have I read this before? And I literally have to hope and pray that I come across the same damn story again, because it will be there with two different titles. Mm-hmm. Or a different opening paragraph just for the fun, so I will never find the story again. And that's pretty much what made it interesting for me. Not difficult, but interesting. Everything else was a breeze. We have had and still have amazing publishers, incredibly patient editors. Mike Davis of the Lovecraft Easing Press is one of them, who keeps championing Joe's work and who has put out reissues of Nightmare's Disciple, End of Blood Will Have Its Season. Derek Hussey of Hippocampus Press, who is eerily patient, and also okay, sorry, I had to take a breath for a second. What was it?
Are we going too much?
No, it's okay. I'm just fighting with this emotion thing. Mid last year, I think, Derek and James Chambers approached me. I had never heard of Jim Chambers before. And they said, we're doing a King in Yellow thing for Hippocampus Press. I said, okay, cool. Do you have anything by Joe's we can use? Perfect. In the perfect world, it's going to be unpublished. And I need time for this. And they gave me all the time in the world I needed. And I signed the contract on Halloween, fittingly enough.
Very nice.
There must have been what, 2-3 months, and they were like, look, here's the timeline. It's okay. If it's finished, it's finished. If it's unfinished, don't bother because we want to be editing. Send us what we have. We'll pick something. And Joe ended up being in the book, and Jim was pleased as hell. And Derek was just like, yeah, of course, it's Joe. It's the King in Yellow. Of course, we're going to try and get something of his in there. So talking to you was the logical thing to do other than just using a reprint. It's like, you people are just so freaking awesome. So we were just lucky with publishers and editors. I know other horror stories, but I never encountered them.
Well,
Maybe we were scared of the German. I don't know.
Maybe. Let me ask this. Aside from Lovecraft, what were his influences in horror?
I'm gonna miss someone, and I'm gonna next time
Just
I
a
walk
general,
into the hallway.
yeah, not an
Ern is gonna
itemized
kick
list.
me. Okay. Obviously, the part where I breathed heavily earlier, his main influence was Robert W. Chambers. He was a King in Yellow fanatic. He had written in the Lovecraft vein because it worked for him, but deep down, it was always the King. And I don't think you can see this, but behind me is a huge yellow sign banner. And
I
I mean
see
huge.
half of it. I see the bottom half.
Okay. That hung over our bed as long as he lived.
Okay.
I'm so thankful we never conceived offspring because holy crap, that would have been difficult under these circumstances under the banner of the king. No, Chambers was, and if you know your Chambers and you read your Pulver, you will see the influences even when it's not as apparent as it should be. Someone else was Robert Bloch, whom he adored. I'm missing people. Brian Lumley.
Okay.
McNaughton.
Massive respect.
I'm sorry?
Massive respect to Lumley, Brian Lumley.
Yeah.
Good man.
Great man from what little I've been able to hear from other sources than the fanboy himself. I'm missing people. There's often stories more than anything. Like I said, John Reach's City of Night, which made a massive influence, made a massive difference in Joe's life. But yeah, if you want to keep it short and sweet, definitively Chambers. He is the King in Yellow.
Okay. Let me ask you this, away from, because I asked Julia a similar question when she was on a couple of weeks ago. What's your opinion about? And you mentioned this. Well, no, you sort of brushed past it, so I'm not gonna touch that. But what's your opinion about the current state of horror, be it cinematic, be it literary? Where do you think things stand right now? Is it in a good place?
You'll have to come up with. I'm sorry for interrupting. You will have to come up with something else, and we'll go into the field that Julia asked me earlier if it's okay to touch it or not. When I have been out of the horror loop, other than promoting Friends and occasionally Joe, since August of 2017.
Okay.
Joe became all of a sudden very sick 2 weeks before the Necronomicon in 2017. And we barely got him back from that. He had, however that worked out, he had a cyst on the brain. He did surgery. And brain surgery in itself is always difficult, even if it's just cyst removal. So the recovery was extremely slow. As soon as he had come out of the hospital and was supposed to start rehab, which would have been extremely important at this point, I almost completely lost my eyesight. To this day, the doctors aren't quite sure how it happened, other than that my optical nerve got inflamed to a part where it disintegrated in parts. It's been a mix of being simply unable to read for almost 2 years because my sight was nothing but black and white and murky as crap. I mean, blurry as, I don't know what you guys call this. These office or bathroom windows where you have a sheen on them so people can't peek in. We
Yeah, I know
call
what
them
you're
milk
talking about.
glass.
Yeah.
And that was that was how I was seeing things, like you look through one of
Okay.
these doors. Plus, there was, of course, Joe, who needed 24/7 care until he even partially came back from the brain surgery. And just every time he had gotten back from it, something else happened. There was two severe bouts of too much fluid in the system. There was what's it called? COPD? The lung thing?
Yes.
That's the lung issue.
COPD.
Emphysema. Yeah. Used to call it.
Right. And we had barely managed to get along with that when he collapsed yet again. And turned out that the vague threat of maybe kind of epilepsy had become very real and extremely intense. And his first medication was the highest level they could have given him, that kind of really bad epilepsy. So as much as I love my horror movies and as voracious a reader as I've been, I can barely see the damn movies. So anything about the current state, I'm totally out. I'm sorry.
I understand. Yeah. One of the things that connected me to Julia was and I don't use them as often as I do. Probably Julia's channel more than anything else is the audiobook.
Yeah.
So that's and with through Julia's channel, I've been able to catch on to authors that I would not necessarily on my own have, connected with. And so, through the internet connected to Julia, through the internet connected to you, it becomes that thing that we talked about with the MySpace and everything. And, and my statement that, at times this is what the internet is supposed to be.
Absolutely.
And so, in its highest form, I get a kick out of just, being able to have these conversations with people that, without this format, it would not have been possible. And so I think this is, this is a real treat for me. And, I appreciate that both of you have taken the time to, come out and shoot the breeze with me for a little bit.
Hey, it's not so much about us taking the time. It's about the people creating things. It's about Julia and her readings, the passion she puts into them. I hate audiobooks. I can't keep focused. But
there's a lot of secrets being dropped here.
But it depends on the reader.
Right.
Not because Julia has read a lot of Joe's story, but Julia has the kind of voice, of reading skill, of just the perfect mix of all these things, of the passion she has for that. I can listen to her stories. I love listening to it. And short story collections on ebooks, yay! Or audiobooks, absolutely. Everything else is extremely difficult for me because in my nature, I can't just sit somewhere and listen.
Yeah.
It's killing me. I can curl up with a book for hours, but audiobooks is always like, oh, I should be doing this, and oh, I could do that, and then one thing,
your mind wanders,
takes over. Absolutely. So that's the thing. But I remember 2010 when Mike Davis started the Lovecraft Easy, and he's like, I had this crazy idea. Why don't we all sit together and get a couple of writers or a couple of fans or mix of it all, and we just shoot the breeze. And this thing has lasted until this day. And they get, people in there like Claire Barron, who's friends with the folks, but also a pretty damn good writer. They had, they take time out to promote indie movies, musicians that aren't well known, game designers, fans, conventions. These things blow out of proportion, and everyone who starts to read for others, who starts a podcast, or like me, just starts this weird little MySpace page
Yeah.
out of the love for horror or a specific person, or just the enjoyment of sharing your own love for the weird stuff with others, we create a basis that
Yeah.
brings people together. And this is me channeling my husband. Fuck.
Nothing
No,
wrong
but
with
you
that.
get my drift. It's important. We keep doing this. I'm sorry.
The idea, or the thing that I had talked about a few minutes ago about, the internet bringing us together, is only sort of a surface observation, because at the end of the day, it's the work, and our common, affection for it, by degrees, depending on person to person, that actually brings us together. It's Julia's, audiobooks, but it's the content itself, what it is that she's reading, because if it was, something else, I may not have been, necessarily drawn to that. But okay, she's reading, these ghost stories, or she's reading M.R. James, or she's reading, Adam Neville, or things like that. And then I'm just like, okay, yeah, this is okay, this is where I live,
Yeah.
and so, to have you here, and to talk about these things, in dark fantasy and, horror fiction, and, okay, this is where I live. So it's the work itself, beneath the format of the internet, that, that brings us all here. And, the facility is this, this browser page that allows us to do it. But, what's actually doing it is the writing and the films and the, our feeling about that, our strong feeling about that. If I didn't give a, let me just say this real quick. If I didn't give a crap, it would just be like, oh yeah, I met this guy Rich, and he was, and we talked about this, and he said something, blah blah blah, yada. Instead, it was like, and then, Bill Moseley, meeting this guy, or meeting, this person here, there, and the other. It's the feeling and the emotion that, the work itself has generated, that, enables the rest of it. And this sort of fellowship, that has brought us all together, from different parts of the world, and, that we have this thing that is relatable to all of us. And so,
absolutely,
I couldn't be more pleased about that, on a Friday afternoon, to be having this conversation with the two of you.
Thank you, first and foremost. The other thing, just two quick observations, and then I'll try to let this boil down so everyone can sneak out if needed. One, Julia, what was your resource you quoted as starting with Lovecraft?
Supernatural horror in literature.
What is it what you do with your channel right now?
Sorry?
What is it that you do with your channel right now? Isn't that
well, I'm just trying to keep some content coming out every week.
No, but you're introducing us to the same to the stories you like, just in the same way that that we all chanted with supernatural horror in literature.
Yeah, and I've got a creepypasta coming up tomorrow.
Ooh, I heard that,
which I hope you will like, because that really impressed me. Of course, I wanted to say the words of that story. I just loved it. So I've got a few things stored up. I want to do F. Marion Crawford's "The Blood Is the Life," and I'm kind of ambivalent about it, because I've never seen why it's quite so scary. So I'm hoping your perceptions of a story change when you read the words out loud. So reading it quietly, just reading the printed words is one experience. Listening to somebody else read them is another experience. Reading them yourself is another experience altogether. So, for example, Oliver Onions, spelled onions, did this story called The Beckoning Fair One. Now, it's quite a scary story, but when I read it out loud, I became so frightened. I had to stop reading and calm down. because
Wow.
everything is heightened, but it's also your perceptions are changed a bit. I don't know how much time we've got left. There's a story by Conrad Aiken, which is one of my favorite ever, called Silent Snow, Secret Snow. And the consensus has always been this is a story about a boy who is going mad. He's succumbing to schizophrenia. When I read it out loud, in the very first paragraph, I said, no, he's not going mad. He's going deaf. That's what this is about. He's going deaf. That's where the hissing noise is the tinnitus. And the closing down is because he can't hear things anymore. And he can no longer hear the postman. That's the first sign. He can't hear the postman. So he assumes it must be the snow, the silent, secret snow that no one can see. But he knows it's there because it's muffling all the sound. And so I am hoping that by reading For the Blood is the Life out loud, I will suddenly realize why it's scary.
Okay.
Insights,
You know who to turn to.
insights and varying perspectives, and looking at it from a different point of view. Yeah, that's important. And it's good work that you do.
And sometimes it's just the personal thing that suddenly hits you and says, oh crap, is that what this is about? Oh wow. Yeah. And it's beautiful. I love that. Yeah. Speaking of personal insights and how horror connects, and I'll make that really sure, I promise. There's this famous guy out there, Sam Raimi. This is not about him.
Sure.
Sam has an amazing brother who happens to be an actor, Ted.
Okay.
And Ted has been in a lot of sci-fi movies and shows. And while I was still a Star Trek fanatic and went to conventions, I was also on the other side being my horror self. So while everyone else was running around in Star Trek uniforms, I was usually the one in black. So back then I was they were able to find me. It's like, have you seen that, about 5 foot something, all dressed in black? Oh yeah, she's back there. And Ted was there for the sci-fi angle of his work. And I just had to get an autograph. I liked his work, and he was such a charmer on stage. Oh my God, so funny, so witty, perfect. And I was the last in line. They were about to close up, and he was getting his things in order, and we chatted a bit. And at some point, he looks up, he asks my name, writes the autograph, and he looks up again, said, "You're not a sci-fi fan, are you?" And I said, "Yes, but..." We spent 30 minutes talking horror. He was glowing. He was so pleased to finally be able to connect with someone out of the sci-fi thing just for a bit to talk about the real passion the brothers shared. It was amazing. I had so much fun, and I turned around and I looked at a couple of teenage girls, and they were all like fangirls, serious fangirls. How the fuck did you manage that? I don't know. We share a passion. What?
I had a similar experience with Hunter S. Thompson, of all people. That was weird, because I didn't know who he was until afterwards.
Wait, keep going with that. What happened?
There was a little shop, Bernard Taylor. It used to be called Bernard's Place. At first it was in Covent Garden, and then it moved to Lamb's Conduit Street, which is fairly close to where I live. Anyway, I went there for this literary evening. I can't remember who it was for. It wasn't for Hunter S. Thompson, it was for somebody else. And I got talking to this guy in a checked shirt. And we started talking about bikers for some reason. And I'm not sure what we went on to next, but I just ended up spending half the evening talking to him. And it's like literally months later, you're the guy who monopolized Hunter S. Thompson so that no one else could speak to him. I'm like, I've never met Hunter S. Thompson. That was Hunter S. Thompson. Why didn't somebody tell me? Why didn't somebody tell me?
So wait. I guess that means that his effect was just every day when you spoke to him.
Well, he didn't come across like somebody really famous. He did mention something about having written a book, but it's like everybody's written a book except me, you know.
I wrote a
Everybody's
book.
written a book. It's like when I first met Clive Barker, he said that he was an author, but he
Jesus.
hadn't been published yet. And I thought to myself, yeah, you and a million others, not
It's
realizing.
anyone you haven't met.
Um,
I'm kidding.
Colin
Wow.
Fiore. There's a lot of people I haven't met. I never met Leonard Nimoy. I never met William Shatner. I never met Nichelle Nichols. No, I think that the people I haven't met outnumber by the lot. But Clive Barker, that was interesting because I was trying to get work in the theatre, and I ended up at the Cockpit Youth Theatre doing props on a play called Subtle Bodies, which was written by Clive Barker.
Mm-hmm.
And he was there saying, you know, that yes, he's a writer, he just hasn't been published yet. And I'm like, yeah, you and a million others. He lent me John Shirley's Sellers. I remember that. It was one of the scariest books I've ever read, Sellers by John Shirley. And I think I lent him a book or two. Anyway, then he gets published, and I read his stuff, and I'm like, oh my God, you're brilliant. You know, you're incredible. These were the books of blood, and he's kind of like, you know,
wow.
you're sure you mean that?
I mean, I've realized.
Anyway, the next thing I know, he's really famous and moved to the States. But at the time,
The biggest mistake I made was buying the books of blood on Kindle. And I'm going to have to amend that because I'm a page turner. I'm definitely a page turner. Let me ask Kat this one thing, and I believe Liam Neeson.
Yeah.
Can we? What's that about? Yeah, what's that about? For those that if you catch this on the replay, because it's the middle of the day, so many people are at work, that are usually my audience, so they'll catch it on the replay or whatever. Kat has a bit of a fascination.
Just a touch.
Well, let's face it, he's a babe, isn't he? He's a babe.
Hold on, Julia. Let Kat speak for herself. Hold on a second.
Which reminds me of the classical Julia angle. So here we are fangirling, not her, but me and a group of girls, and I get back to that in a second. And there's a picture of Liam and Ray Fiennes, and Julia replies.
Ray Fiennes does it for me.
Uh-huh.
Ray Fiennes is a babe. He's so beautiful,
isn't he? And you said something along the lines of, "Oh, I've met him," and it was apparent that because we had talked about Ray Fiennes and that it was about Ray, and the girls like, "Oh, what? You met Liam?" And said, "No, Ray Fiennes," and I was about the only one going, "Holy crap!" It was, oh, okay, just that guy. So, what is it about Neeson?
Where did this begin? How did this, like, what was your first exposure where you're like...
Long, weird, funny story. My mom worked in a travel agency. So she was able to take me to trips we both couldn't have afforded. And at some point we had a Great Britain round trip, and she loved the place so much she booked something similar the next year, which turned out to be Great Britain, Ireland. And while I was familiar with the UK, I had no interest whatsoever in Ireland. And soon as I hit the island physically, it's like, what the hell is going on? Which is something that happens to people in Ireland. There was some kind of a weird connection that's been with me ever since. Fast forward a couple of years later, a friend of mine who's a huge Star Wars fan has made a trip to Berlin. And part of his itinerary is he wants to see Star Wars Phantom Menace in the movie theaters in English, which was doable in Berlin, but not in his hometown. I can't connect to Star Wars no matter how much I tried. It's not my kind of thing. It's not my kind of interest as a story, as a mythology. So my original plan was we go to the movie theater, we get the ticket, we have dinner in an Irish pub, which is across the street. I stay there. I listen to the live music. I have a Guinness or two. He watches this movie. He's happy. He comes back. We have another couple of Guinness. He bores me with the story. Yada, yada, yada. because I didn't want to go in there and sit next to him with the glazed over eyes of someone who's bored to death as soon as the first thing starts rolling. I said, oh God, it's Star Wars, really? And he begged me and he pleaded and I resisted. And ultimately he said, well, screw you. I have 2 tickets, so you're coming along. So, all righty then. So I'm sitting there and I'm trying to stay awake, which is difficult enough. And all of a sudden he nudges me and says, see that guy? I said, uh-huh. He's Irish. That should tide you over for the movie. So, oh, all right. So we'll get language training. And I just adored the character. Whatever it is about Qui-Gon Jinn in Star Wars, I was, pun not intended, taken. Holy crap, was I fascinated. And sadly enough, everyone who knows me and has watched movies with me knows when I pick a character, that's bad news. They either turn out to be the bad guy, often veiled and not recognizable, or they will not survive the movie. Period. 99 out of 100. And
the kiss of death.
He dies. Yeah, the second I fall for someone, it's like, oh crap. We learned that lesson really hard. And that was about 10 years before the internet. So I didn't have to go far to learn about Star Wars, and still didn't get into the movies in themselves, but started, as I often do when a role or an actor interests me, started to look at other movies. And the next thing I came across was Michael Collins, which is the Easter Rising in Ireland, which is back to having my topic all over it. And it went on and on and on. It's like, holy crap, that guy's good.
Yeah.
And he doesn't look so bad either. So that was a fangirl starting in the 1990s, and it waved off, of course, when I got married, because it's difficult to sit somewhere starry-eyed and just enjoy the look of an actor when your husband is sitting across the room from me, just giving you the really look. So
that one, yeah, all right.
We kind of stayed away from that a bit. And when when Joe had passed and I was struggling with a lot of things, I had wonderful people by my side. I had Julia, who I could turn to at any point for any bullshit, just to get out of the blues, or to complain, or to cry, or to whatever, which is really rare because grief is a topic that people stay away from. I don't know why. They fear it. They don't know how to deal with it. So, and I was very open and very public about this. Due to Neeson as well, who's been very public about the death of his wife and the shit he and his kids had to go through, including something similar to what I had to do. That is, decide to let your loved one go. Joe could have lived to this day, kept alive by fucking machines and nothing else, never regaining consciousness again. That's not living. But it's difficult to make that decision. And like I said, Julia, Mike Davis, a whole lot of people I can't even all name at this point. A friend who has passed on her own on my birthday this year. They all were there for me, and it was often suggested, find something that makes you happy. Find a happy place you can go to when everything gets too bad and shit just hurts and you need something cute and warm and lovable, or something that distracts you. And slowly but surely, Neeson came back around as I watched the A-Team, I think. And it's like, damn, right.
Oh, Lord. Okay.
This guy. Right. And he's just my happy place. You know, talking with the girls, freaking out about, oh my God, did you see that? I'm not going to go any deeper into that, but it's just a happy place. It's a hobby, not so much. I know how bad it looks online.
No, I'm
terrible
just
hyena.
Poking at you a little bit,
That's fine. No, but that's really, it's something that, some people take to knitting and some people take to walks in nature or playing cards. And with me, it's just, it's a happy place. He doesn't hurt me. There is no chance we're ever going to cross paths. Oh, please not. So no, it's just a mild obsession.
Gotcha. Well, we're close actually to the 2-hour mark.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this is one of those things where
We've been talking 2 hours.
Yeah, it's been 2 hours.
Oh my God.
I think this is one of those things I could probably go on a lot longer. But what I'd like to do, I'd love to have you back on sometime if you would find that agreeable. We can talk about that again.
Never. I'm so bored. I can't wait to get out of this.
If you start snoring, I'm cutting you out of the stream. All right. So goodbye. Goodbye. Uh-huh. But I think I think this is maybe a place to sort of bring it to a close now that we've discussed your light fascination with Liam Neeson. That's a tough one to follow up. And we figured out that Julia's jealous of you because somebody's jealous of somebody because they met Brad Dourif. And
who might that be?
There have been a lot of reveals here, so I'm sure we're going to need some time to process this all out. And
thin ice, good sir, thin ice.
I really I can't thank both of you enough for taking the time to come out here. I would love to have you both on again, either individually or as a group, and if it's just discussion or maybe discussing, a film or a book or a story or something like that. You definitely would be welcome to the show. Absolutely.
Final revelation, as scared as I've been to do this because it's my first public interview with someone who is not a family friend. This is why Julia kindly agreed to be here to be my emotional support human. It's been a lot of fun. Absolutely. I'll be happy to try this again if this doesn't mean that your podcast just crashed because everyone's like, oh God, the weird German.
No, I don't think that will be the case, and it's been a big contribution to the show and a lot of insight, and that's what as much as I enjoy film reviews, once I started doing because I started doing this in January of 21, so it's been about we're going up on 2 years now, and in the second year I started doing interviews. And so this opportunity to glean insight from people I never would have ordinarily met, be it screenwriters or producers or writers, actors, so on and so forth. It really has adjusted my perspectives in a really good way because, they provide little nuggets here or sometimes, a gold mine of information that, I just never would have, that never would have occurred to me. On my own. So I would like very much to continue in the vein of conducting interviews or they're just conversations, it's not this thing where you stick a microphone in someone's face and what do you think about that? It's just, it's talking to people.
Sit together on a nice cup of tea and whatnot.
Yeah, imagine that,
By the way, about the giggles, so you both have something to laugh about.
What have you got there? I can't see that from.
Okay, I'm not close enough to the camera, am I?
Oh Lord! All right, this is definitely a place to bring it to a close.
Just to show you that this is mine.
Okay.
Okay, you got to tell me what it is. I can't see it.
It says caution radioactive, and it's got one of those radiation danger signals.
Very fitting, ma'am. Very fitting.
Well, I'd like to thank you both for taking the time to come out again and just shoot the breeze with me. Julia, tell people where they can find your content.
You just go to YouTube and Google Morgan Scorpion as written down there. So go onto YouTube and search for Morgan Scorpion.
And what have you got coming up soon?
It's a story called A Vampire Movie. And if you just hold on a second. Who's it by? It's spelled Deschene, Deschene. Impressed the hell out of me, that little story. A creepypasta story.
Okay.
So I love creepypastas. I listen to them a lot.
Okay.
So I'm hoping you'll enjoy that one.
I'm sure we will.
Sure I will.
Kat, where can people find you on social media?
Yeah, social media is the go-to thing because I'm still working on Joe's homepage. I can be found for the daring ones on Twitter as Lady Lovecraft. It's a protected account, and it's pretty much a lot of fangirling, not just for Neeson.
Liam Neeson. Liam Neeson.
Yeah, pretty
I love
much.
you too, Jules. No, it's on occasion it's news bits and a bit of Batman stuff and whatnot. But for the real case and the horror angle, you may find me at Facebook as Lady Lovecraft 1978, which is my birth year, shockingly enough, because someone else stole the handle before me.
Okay.
If there's any news about Joe and or things related, they will be public on Facebook. And just a quick thing, there's two books out I would love you people to know about. The one is New Map of Dreams. I hope you can see that. That
Yes.
is something that Joe and Cody Goodfellow had come up with together, that Cody kindly pretty much took over when Joe became sick. So Cody did the hardcore work part of putting the table of contents together, getting everyone to agree, finally editing stories, and Joe had pretty much only, tagged several writers and accepted the first round of stories. So Cody has done a lot of things, but it's still a co-edited thing. And then there is available via ebook and Kindle at this point, and hopefully by October as a physical book via Chaosium Inc. The Leaves of a Necronomicon. It is a novel written in separate chapters, each by a different author.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay, that's interesting.
Everything by Joe. It's based on the idea of accordion crimes, and he had played with that for years. And Chaosium had gone through a couple of ups and downs, so it's a couple of years old, but it finally saw the light of day. And this is his final hooray as an editor. He loved the idea. He loved all the story. It's all of his thing. And I want you people to read this because it's bloody brilliant. It's the usual suspects from Michael Sisko to you name him. If you know your Pulver, go get it. If you don't know him, go to Chaosium Inc. Look for the Leaves of a Necronomicon. They have the TOC just with the names and a couple of blurbs. You'll love it. I know you'll love it.
Okay.
So please go buy. Please. It's not for the money. It's for the old man and his name being still out there.
I'm going to place, and we didn't talk about this very much, but we've got the Lovecraft e-zine, where a lot of Joe's work can be found. And I'm going to be posting these links in the description for the YouTube video so people can access where you can find some of his stories. And I'm going to post the link to his Amazon page where people will be able to find his work.
Two things about this. Amazon is really easy. JoePulver.com. Mike Davis set that up for most. Also for a lot of other people, like JeffreyThomas.com will lead you to everything that's on sale on Amazon for Jeff. The other thing is my YouTube channel. I have one too. I think it runs as Lady Lovecraft, and that's about it. Maybe Lady Lovecraft 1978. Look for the one with the Neeson videos. There's a lot of Joe Pulver there too.
I'm not putting that up there.
That's okay. No. The YouTube page also has a lot of the e-zine panels, like Mike's panel, who's on YouTube as well as Lovecraft e-zine. A couple of Joe Pulver, a couple of things he read by himself, a couple of Necronomicon or general convention footage. So if you're interested in seeing more about Joe, absolutely look for the Lovecraft e-zine and just go through the panels up to 2018 for Joe specifically, but in general, go there, have fun. You might see a couple of familiar faces like Miss Morgan, me, sometimes. I'm more of a voice in the back bringing in the drinks. So absolutely, go hunt that down. Scrap my YouTube page. I don't want to scare people.
Okay. Gotcha. I'll get those links in there. When this closes up, and then later on this evening. My thanks once again to Julia Morgan for coming in and hanging out a little bit and taking some time, and then of course to you, to Katrine J. Pulver, Lady Lovecraft, for coming in and sharing some of your story.
Thank you for having me.
It's greatly appreciated. Yes, absolutely. And as ever, I'm sure we'll chat up here and there on Twitter, but I would love to have you guys back on again, in whatever shape or, capacity is preferable to you two. So, that
try
works.
the human shape. Thank you.
Yeah, well, that was implied. All right, I've got a quick outro, but then stick around, you two, and I'll talk to you for just a second, okay? I'll be back. We'll be back next week. What do I have coming up next week? I don't know. I'm going to be doing continuing the Summer of Crime, which is a theme we've had for the summer about crime thrillers, with Frank Miller's Sin City, which actually should be a fun one to discuss. And then on Friday, I'm going to do a redo or redux or whatever you call it, because I'm from New Jersey, so we don't know how to pronounce those types of things. We're going to be looking at, again, we did this once before, a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to be looking at a movie that we had covered once already. And we're going to be looking at it again because it was at the start of when I first started doing this, and ums and ahs, and I feel that it's a film that deserves a much larger panel. I'm going to be looking at Adam Neville's The Ritual, which is just a fantastic horror film and criminally overlooked. And it deserves as many people as possible talking about it. And so I'm going to spend my Friday night doing my best to bring that insight out to people. My thanks to both of you again. Let's definitely keep in touch. I'm sure we will. And thanks so much, everybody. And enjoy the rest of your evening. Stick around, you two, just for a second. Good night.